Welcome back to part 7 of Single Stack Objects. In this lesson, we'll fully unpack a feature we introduced in a previous lesson called value sets. As you may recall, we previously used a value set as a restriction when creating the patient assessment object from the previous lesson. The restriction is in value set was used to limit the patient assessments returned to only those with patients living in certain zip codes. The first step in working with value sets is to navigate to Ursa Studio's Metadata Manager. And from here, we'll open the Value Sets tile. We'll go through the process of creating a value set and explore best practices for naming value sets over the next few minutes. Value sets are lists of values that represent some uniform concept. In other words, a grouping of values with something in common. A value set could be a list of diagnosis codes for a particular disease, categorical identifiers from a source system, or, as we've seen, a list of zip codes that define the geographic footprint of a program. It could also be any list of values that are best served being stored in a central repository. In Ursa Studio, value sets are flexible and not confined to the traditional concept of a value set as a derivative of national code sets. From this screen, you can search across and within value sets. You could search by any of the properties of a value set, like its name. For example, searching for CCS multi-level retrieves all value sets that contain CCS multi-level. You can also search for values within value sets, like an ICD-10 code. To search within a value set, prepend value to the value you're searching for. For example, by searching for value F55.0, you'll retrieve all value sets that contain that value. So to create a value set, we'll start by selecting the plus icon. This will open a template for creating a new value set. Next, we'll select or enter a namespace. We discussed namespaces when we covered functionality related to terms. As a reminder, a namespace is a code identifying who owns the associated asset, which in this case is a value set. The AA namespace stands for Application Agnostic and is used for non-client specific uses. The MTM namespace is an example of a client-specific namespace, which is for value sets related to medication therapy management. For the value set we're creating, I'm going to use the namespace TRN for training. Next, we will select or enter a value type. Value types identify the field type that the values are associated with, for example, ICD-10 or HCPCS codes. The value type could also be a code that's associated with a source system that the data is coming from, or a classification system created by a group in your organization. The value sets feature is completely open-ended, so you can utilize some of the standards we've already created, or you can create your own. A convention our technical services team uses is to enter defining characteristics of a value set in uppercase to signal that they represent formal names. For our value set, we can type zip 5-digit, which is the appropriate value type for the set we're creating. Tabbing to the cluster field, clusters are groups of value sets that we want to use as a lookup table. For example, we could create a cluster related to behavioral health ICD-10 codes. Each value set might represent something like the diagnosis codes for anxiety or depression, but the cluster would encompass all ICD-10 codes concerning behavioral health. So, a cluster is a set of value sets that create a larger lookup table that can be joined to an object when needed. The value set we are creating is not going to be part of a cluster, so we don't need to enter anything into this field. Next, we'll enter a value set name. It'll be used in the Object Workshop or Measure Builder to invoke the value set for restrictions and transformations. The convention for the name is to enter it in all uppercase letters. The best practice we've developed for naming values is to describe a value set as a list of values that's consistent with versus specific to a concept. For example, let's say I create a value set that I can use to identify an office visit. Those codes would immediately conclude if an interaction was an office visit or not. This is an example of a value set that's specific to office visits. On the other hand, if I create a value set of codes that could plausibly be performed at an office visit, that's an example of a value set that is consistent with office visits. When this convention's used, the value set's name is values specific to home healthcare or values consistent with home healthcare. We'll name the value set we are creating eligible zip codes for Diet Right program. Next, we'll enter our value set description. The value set description can be any notation about the value set that's helpful to you. We'll note that this value set includes the zip codes that determine patient eligibility in the Diet Right program. After you've completed the naming steps, you can enter values and descriptions of values. This can be accomplished in two ways. First, you can manually enter the values and the descriptions. After each value you enter, a new row will appear for entering the next value. As you might expect, the values are required, but the descriptions are optional. For example, I can enter the value 94111 and San Francisco, California as the description. The second option is to paste values from a spreadsheet or document using the Append Values icon. When you click on this icon, you'll get a small pop-up window. And from here, you can paste in a list of values or a list of values and descriptions. When pasting in values and descriptions, the list can be space delimited for single-word descriptions or tab delimited for multi-word descriptions. Either way, it's easy to paste from a spreadsheet into a new value set. We are going to cut and paste all values in this spreadsheet I have into the pop-up window to save us from having to manually enter all of this information. Once we've pasted the values in, we can select the Import button, and our value set has been populated. Now, I'm going to go ahead and delete this zip code that I entered manually, the 94111 San Francisco, so that we don't have a duplicate value when I go to save this. Now, if you'd like, you can enter a comment by clicking the comment icon to the right of each value set. Our value set doesn't require any additional explanation at this point, so we don't need to enter any comments. In addition to being able to list out specific values, you can also specify specific ranges or wildcards. When you enter a value with a dash or an asterisk, you'll see the Is Literal Value checkbox pop up to the right of the description field. By default, the checkbox is selected assuming the value you entered is to be taken literally. When the checkbox is unselected, Ursa Studio will treat values with a dash as a range, and values with an asterisk as a wildcard. When it's appropriate, this can save a lot of time when constructing value sets. Now, before we save the value set, we need to enter an explanation. It's generally useful to describe the purpose of the value set here. So for this one, we can say, value set for use in diet-right program analysis. So now we can go ahead and save our new value set. After saving the value sets, we're redirected to the value set screen. From here, let's review a few features related to editing value sets. First, let's retrieve the value set we just created by searching for diet right in the search bar. To edit the value set, just click on the chevron to the right and you'll see the set's details. Here there are several options for editing the value set. You can add, edit, or remove values from the list. If you want to clear all values from the set and start over, you can select the eraser icon. And if you make any changes that you'd like to cancel, select the cancel or undo icon. If you would like to export the value list to a CSV file, you can select the download icon. You probably noticed that while you can edit the names of the value set, the namespace, type, cluster, name, and description are not editable. You can rename a value set by selecting the suitcase icon. We refer to this process as migrating the value set. Migrating a value set renames it and then propagates that name change to all the dependent objects in the platform that utilize it in some way. Looking at this Edit Reference Review icon, you'll see this icon for value sets that have values that match with one of our reference data sets. We'll review the reference data feature in depth in a future lesson, so for now, just keep in mind that the link between these features is available. Finally, if you want to delete a value set, you can simply select the trash can icon. But please keep in mind that if you delete a value set, it is not recoverable. Some last considerations about value sets before we wrap up this lesson. First, all value sets are stored in the table mi_aa_002. We've done this so that you can reference the table from outside Ursa Studio when it's useful. Second, some value sets are editable and others are not. These read-only ones are pre-populated with the environment when Ursa deploys and contain values defined by third parties like AHRQ. So that concludes our lesson on value sets. Thank you for your time, and I will see you in the next lesson.